Republic of Namibia, who is present in this assembly, permit me also to recognize the men and women who have organized this occasion, and those of you who have taken time to be with us this evening. I have written a paper which will be circulated to you in the fullness of time, and I hope that time will be full sooner rather than later, and that you shall have the occasion to read that paper and therefore to appreciate the full flavor of my presentation in a more disciplined way. Let me preface my presentation by reminding you that I do not claim to have the monopoly of wisdom. I remember as a young student of law being introduced to the great Greek philosopher Socrates, and I remember being told then that in those days of yore, the oracle of Apollo sent out emissaries into Greece to find out who was the wisest man. And they went yonder into Greece, and there were great thinkers, Aristophanes, Sophocles, and many others. And when they went to Socrates, when he was asked, "What do you know?" he said the only thing that he knew was that he knew nothing. And on that account, he was pronounced the wisest man in Greece. I too know nothing. And what I do is to share my experience, not because I have a different understanding of them, but it is my appreciation of those things as I walk across Africa and as I observe the continent of Africa. There is a tendency or an inclination to philosophize about the problems of Africa, to intellectualize about the problems of Africa, and sometimes to moralize about them. But the African problems are real. To the Bangala woman in the Democratic Republic of Congo, who has no place to rest because of a civil war, the problems are real. To the men and women who cannot go to school or have a morsel of food to eat in Bangui, in the Central African Republic, the problems are real. To those in Mogadishu in Somalia who cannot plan beyond 1 week because of Al-Shabaab, the problems are real. To the women who are escaping from rape to rape in Maiduguri, in northern Nigeria, the problems are real. To the young men and women who risk crossing the Sahara Desert to face the Mediterranean Sea in unseaworthy vessels, saying it is better to die trying than to live in my country, the problems are real. So when we are assembled here this evening, it is that Africa that we are examining. An Africa which, if you permit me to use this medical term, is schizophrenic. It presents a successful Botswana, a successful Namibia where the GDP is something in the neighborhood of 12,000 United States dollars. Never mind the distribution for the moment. But it also presents you with Equatorial Guinea, whose per capita income is 35,000 United States dollars. Never mind the distribution. But it also has Central African Republic, which is not at ease. It provides you with South Sudan, the youngest nation in Africa, where the Nuer and the Dinka have risen against each other, and they are slaughtering each other, even in hostels and in churches and other places of worship. That is the Africa that you have. It is an Africa about which commentators have many things to say. It is an Africa about which they say Africa is rising without ever asking for whom does it rise. It is an Africa about which they say has the fastest growing economies in the world, with Angola at 9% or even more, with Ethiopia at 11% or even more. But tell the people in rural Angola and in rural Ethiopia that the economy is rising, they'll tell you that is voodoo economics. It is only economic romanticists who are writing papers in refereed journals that are talking about this, but on the ground, nothing is happening. They'll tell you about that Africa. And that is why, therefore, my presentation this evening is about Africa unleashing her potential. But one must go back to history in order to understand where we are and where it is that we are going and what it is that we ought to do going forward. We talk about globalization. But throughout history, Africa has always been globalized. The slave masters globalized us. We were commodified. Africa and Africans built Europe and America. Half of the population of Africa was taken away initially by the Arabs on the eastern coast, and ultimately on the western coast, and some from the southern coast, and taken in what was agrarian Europe and agrarian United States of America. And you built Europe and America by the sweat of their brow. When slavery lost her luster, the colonial project came about. European countries sat, as history will remind you, in Berlin, in a conference that sometimes is called King Leopold's Conference, and parceled out Africa with undue rigor to the realities on the ground. Your country was given out to the Germans. And the Germans did not stop there. They went to Tanganyika and took Tanganyika, and they did not stop there. They went to Dahomey and took yet another slider from that western coast. Even Portugal, little Portugal, took big Angola, and they took big Mozambique, and they took Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, and their neighbors did not rest. They were Johnny-come-latelys, and they got a sliver of land called Equatorial Guinea. And the British and the French, of course, took the lion's share. The Italians tried in Ethiopia without success, but succeeded in Libya. And the Belgians, little Belgium, took the Democratic Republic of Congo. And once again, when colonialism lost its luster and is always instructive, and this is how the world has always been very interesting. And in the morning I was talking about the American Declaration of Independence, which I love. The opening words say that all men are born equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with some unalienable right, that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When they were saying those things, men of color, white women were not in the equation. But they did not stop there. In 1945, in San Francisco, in the United States, when the United Nations was being created and it was being said that, well, we are all equal, 3 years later, Henry Fafoot was in South Africa creating a regime as pernicious can be, saying that you Negroids who are present here are nothing but good for drawing water and hewing wood. And this country was to suffer under the weight of that regime. But it must always be remembered that the Africans who are resisting, the Herero resisted here. And almost half the population was decimated. It was not until very recently that the Germans apologized. In Tanganyika, the Maji rebellion, and in Kenya, my Kenya, the Mau Mau rebellion. So it was not as if we succumbed. We were forced, and we succumbed by dint of superior weaponry. But in the 1950s, we gained our political independence. And the words of Kwame Nkrumah in Accra, Ghana ring true. He said that the independence of Ghana means nothing if the rest of Africa is not free. And you will remember that during that period there were many countries that were gaining their independence. And you, particularly the young ones, will not remember that the African leaders of the day knew who was where in the West. Names such as Modibo Keita of the Sudan, now Mali made sense. Some of them did not go to school. Ahmed Seko Toure of Guinea, Namdi Azikiwe of Nigeria, and in the same country, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa and the Sardar of Sokoto, Sahamadu Bello. They were great Africans. Julius Kambarage Nyerere, Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, Kamuzu Banda, Kenneth Kaunda, down south here, you still remember, and I'm told is still alive and well, Sam Myoma, and the late Andimba Haman Toivo Ya Toivo. In other words, they were great Africans, and the clarity with which they saw Africa was as astounding as it was titillating. I'm inviting you to take time to read the 32 speeches delivered between the 23rd and 25th days of May 1963 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Each one of them, even the one that you did not think much about, had something to say that was sound and good. But of course, the most enlightened speech of the day, man with a sense of urgency and conviction, was that of Osajefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. He exhorted the leaders who are present on that day, let us not leave this hall without one army, without one command force. Let us not leave here without one country with its capital in what was then called Leopoldville, now called Kinshasa. Let us not leave here without one currency. Let us do this because if we delay, we shall get used to our titles and our sovereignty, and the neo-colonialists will influence and divide us. Nkrumah was not a Jewish prophet, nor did he have the gift of prophecy. But he could see as clearly as one ought to have seen at that time that Africa could only realize the potential if Africa united. Oh, he was right. He was right. Because even before he made that speech, the neo-colonialists had started destroying Africa. Many of you will remember that the first coup d'etat in Africa was in 1960, the overthrow of Togo's Sylvanus Olympio. And 1 year later, Patrice Lumumba was killed by the conspiracy of the Americans, the Belgians, and the use of their acolytes in Mobutu Sese Seko and Jose Kasavubu and Moise Tshombe. Africans were already beginning to be decimated. In the west of Africa, the former French colonies, you had leaders who thought that they were more French than the French themselves. That is how I understood leaders such as Felix Houphouët-Boigny. I'm told that in those days, in the former French colonies, even Abidjan was called Le Petit Paris, complete with students being told to say in morning parades, our ancestors, the Gauls. How could the ancestors of a Negroid be the Gauls? But they said it nevertheless. So that Africa became the only continent in the world that is referred to as Anglophone, English speaking. If you come here in Namibia, what percentage of the population speaks English that you should be called Anglophone? Then they went to the former French colonies and they called them the Francophones. They went to the former Portuguese colonies and called them the Lusophones. Throughout the ages, the struggle has always been the struggle of the mind. René Descartes, that great French philosopher, said, "Cogito ergo sum," I think, so I am. The question is, you Negroes, who are my brothers and sisters, do you think? Because those who are in the business of thinking, we see the results of the thought processes. And if we are thinking, in what direction are we thinking? Because if my history and memory serves me well, the promises of independence were clear. In 1960, we used to say that we have attained political independence, that we may fight disease so that we do not die young. That we are going to fight ignorance so that we do things on the basis of evidence, and that we are going to eliminate poverty because we want our people to live in dignity. The question is, are Africans liberated from disease? Even this good Namibia, your life expectancy is not beyond 53 years. That is a toddler in Japan. You are dying in your youth. In other words, what we ought to have achieved at independence has not been achieved. And it's not lost on me that throughout these years, and it's something that you must look at with disdain. Recently, a number of African leaders have been falling sick. And it's sad that they fall sick. But the tragedy is this: when they fall sick, Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe, who is eloquent as he castigates Europe and other parts of the world, cannot afford to go to a hostel in Harare. No, he goes to Singapore. Mahmoud Buhari, when he's sick, does not attend a hostel in Abuja. No, he goes to London. Eduardo dos Santos of Angola, when he's sick, he goes to Madrid, Spain. Now, these are leaders who have full dockets called ministries of health. They don't even have faith in their health institutions. Why do they then condemn the population to centers of suicide? And as if that was not enough, many African leaders tell us on a daily basis that we have improved the education situation in our country. schools. Oh, but ask them to take their children to those schools. No, their children will go to the United States of America. Their children will go to Australia. Their children will go to France. Their children will go to Portugal. So it is you and me who are God-forsaken who take our children to schools which are local. Talk of low self-esteem. African leaders have also become hunters and gatherers. Our ancestors gathered wild fruits. In this country, they must have gathered those fruits in the Namibia and the Kalahari Desert. In Kenya, they must have gathered them in the Chalbi Desert. But today, our leaders are in the business of gathering cars and buildings and many things. And yet I remember one great philosopher saying that there are people so poor in the world that the only thing they have is money. And there is no shortage of such individuals in Africa, people who engage in primitive accumulation. You know, Alexander the Great died at age 33. He conquered half of the known world. When he died of syphilis, he gave instructions to his 4 war generals, telling them, when I die, I want to have a casket which will allow my hands to be outstretched. And when my hands are so outstretched, I want my casket to be carried by the best physicians in the world. And when they are taking my body to the grave, all the silver and the gold should be strewn on the path, that they may know that to the world I came empty-handed, and empty-handed I leave. If only our leaders would take courage, but they don't. They believe that they are immortal until death visits them. Our leaders have this habit of accumulating things. Shah Bedel Bokassa even had a bed of gold. But the tragedy is that when you have a bed of gold, even sleep will have deserted you. And what you must do is to take sleeping pills to sleep. But even then you cannot sleep. I'm submitting to us that the problem of Africa, as Chinua Achebe said, is simply and squarely a problem of leadership. That is the problem in Africa. And why do I say so? Experience has demonstrated without number that where the leadership is good and sound. Greg Mills, the great South African, advising Paul Kagame and writing after the event, says that the problem of Africa and the reason why Africans are poor is because their leaders have made that choice. He says that poverty is now optional, but the African leaders have made the choice that they are going to worship at the altar of the gods of poverty. And I'm submitting to us that experience has demonstrated that poverty can be dealt with. If you look at other civilizations, you remember at one time Turkey, which was then known as the Ottoman Empire, was called the sick man of Europe. When Atatürk came in Turkey, he became a dictator. And when he was asked, why have you become a dictator? He said, I've become a dictator that there may be no other dictator in Turkey, but that Turkey should rise up from the morass of poverty. And today, when you go to your supermarkets, you get things called Ramptons from Turkey. They even have Turkish schools in Africa. That is Turkey built and midwifed by Atatürk. Leadership is the solution. We are quick to point out Singapore. When Singapore was being forced out of their union with Malaysia, many an obituary was written about Singapore. It was said of Singapore that it would go nowhere. This backwater city-state. But Lee Kuan Yew recognized that when you marshal your people and lead them into some direction, then they will realize their potential. Today, Singapore has a per capita income of nearly 35,000 United States dollars, and it is properly distributed. It is properly distributed. But the problem of Africa, if you allow me to digress a little, is that the per capita income in Africa doesn't begin to tell the story. The GDP of Africa doesn't begin to tell the story. Because one African leader or one African government minister owns more than his entire village. And the tragedy is that that minister still goes to church on Sunday and says, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, and their will be done on earth." And he is the thief of gigantic proportions, stealing on an industrial scale. I'm submitting to us that the problem of Africa is one of leadership. We have seen in Dubai, in the middle of a desert, each one of us who is a middle class here will have gone to Dubai, or your dream is that you go to Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Doha in Qatar. When you are leaving Windhoek to go to Europe and other places, you will take Qatar Airline, Etihad Airline, or the Emirates. These little Arab countries that have emerged, why are they doing so well? Leadership. It all falls on and rises on leadership. It all falls and rises on leadership. If you have bad leaders you only attained independence the other day, and it doesn't come as instant coffee, but you can borrow from countries such as Denmark, countries such as Norway, countries such as Finland, countries such as Sweden, countries such as Singapore, so that by the time you are talking about your vision 2030, Namibia could actually have 80% employment. It is achievable. And with the discipline that I've seen here in Windhoek, where you obey traffic lights, where you have no garbage in your streets, it is achievable because discipline is part of the solution. You can achieve it. But Namibia is an exception to the rule. But that is not to say that the many things cannot happen. Many things can happen. I'm still talking about resources. Look at the Democratic Republic of Congo. Each one of us here has a mobile phone. And in each one of those mobile phones there is rare earth from the Democratic Republic of Congo. It is said that in the rivers of Congo we can generate enough power to light the entire Africa. The Democratic Republic of Congo has cobalt and gold and everything. And yet the Democratic Republic of Congo could not hold their elections last year because they have no money to hold elections. Even Somalia, after 18 years of trouble, could hold an election. The Democratic Republic of Congo cannot hold an election. You know, sometimes as a Christian, I think to myself, when God is upstairs and is looking down upon his earth and is looking at his children, he must hold his chin and say, these children that I put in Africa, what happened? What happened? In the words of Paul, in his letter to the Galatians, you foolish African, who has bewitched you? Who has bewitched us? Who has bewitched us? It is a legitimate question which we do not want asked because our egos don't, but we must ask it, who has bewitched us? Who has bewitched us that we have no faith in ourselves? Who has bewitched us that when we have our wives who are expectant, we send them to the United States in order to deliver boys and girls who will become the citizens of the United States? Who has bewitched us? Who has bewitched us that we are humiliating ourselves at the embassy of the United States of America so that we can have a 5-year visa? Who has bewitched us that we are applying every year to win a lottery for the green card, and when we win it, we have parties. Who has bewitched us? These are painful questions, particularly for the younger generation. Who has bewitched us that our young men and women are risking limb and life, crossing the desert from Nigeria, Niger, and Chad, and Mauritania, and Mali, and dying in the Mediterranean Sea on the belief that when they land in Italy, their lives will never be the same, and the best they do there is to flip hamburgers. Who has bewitched us? Who has bewitched us that it is the European leaders who are meeting in Germany to determine how can we do, on what can we do for these Africans? And yet we have leaders who, if you do not address them as His Excellency, you could be charged with treason in some countries. Who has bewitched us? Who has bewitched us? Because right now, in every African country, civilizations that know what they want are looking at African resources. The Chinese are here. And 2 years ago, is it 1 year ago, the Chinese told their men and women, up till now we allowed you only one child. You can now have a second child. That second child will be here in the next 20 years. Right now, for many who are in the middle class, if you are asked which language you want to learn as a foreign language, is Mandarin. I was telling my pastor that he should not be surprised next time there is a baptismal service when he asked the godparents of some of the children, and what name do you give this child? They'll say, Deng Xiaoping Toi. In other words, culturally we are being reconquered again. We established the University of Namibia, we established the University of Nairobi, the University of Dar es Salaam, complete with civil engineering, but even your beautiful road here in Namibia, taking us to the airport, is being done by the Chinese. Our beautiful road in Nairobi, Kenya, which we call the Thika Superhighway, was done by the Chinese. The road in Uganda from Entebbe to Kampala is being done by the Chinese. The port of Tema in Ghana is being done by the Chinese. The airport in Ghana is being done by the Chinese. Oh, the Chinese. Oh, the Chinese. Where are our engineers? Where are our doctors? Right now, I would not be surprised if at the University of Namibia there is not an institute called the Confucius Institute. There are Confucius Institute at the University of Nairobi, at the University of Dar es Salaam. The Chinese know what they want. And throughout the ages, those who know what they want get what they want if they work at it. The question is, do we know what we want? How can we possibly know what we want if we don't even know in the first place? And once again, I'm saying that the leadership is at the very heart of it. You know, African countries have many ethnicities. Here in Namibia, you don't have the problem in that major sense. In my country, in Kenya, we have it, but we have succeeded in managing. In Tanzania, 120 ethnicities, but Mwalimu Julius Nyerere was very clear. that if you want things to divide you, you'll always get them. Therefore, we must look for things that unite us. And I'm submitting to us that Africa will only realize the potential if we who are assembled here, particularly those of us who have gone to school. You know, it used to be said that we should think out of the box. I'm submitting to us that time has come that we must think without the box. We must throw away the box and begin thinking, because we do not know who brought this box. But we are being told to think outside of. It used to be said that we must heat the iron while it is hot. I'm saying no, we should heat the iron so that it becomes hot. In other words, I'm saying we must begin to do things differently. We must begin to do things that will liberate us. In agriculture, what are we doing in agriculture in Africa? Who makes your seeds, Syngenta and Monsanto? Who supplies you with water? Coca-Cola. Who supplies you with chicken? They get chicken here in Namibia, and then they call them Kentucky Fried Chicken. Why they are not called Windhoek Fried Chicken, I've never understood. We must begin to feed our people, and Africa can feed herself. You talk about unemployment. Why can't we employ our young men and women in the agricultural sector? The South Africans are doing it in the wine areas. Why can't we do it? If the Israelis are engaged in dry land agriculture, I'm told that Sam Nujoma, when he was in the bush and even when he became the president, dreamt of a Namib and Kalahari desert that would be green. Are those dreams not valid? Is it not possible to convert the Kalahari desert into a green environment? Is it not possible to produce food that can feed SADC? Why must we limit our thinking? Those of you who are leaders here, those in parliament, sometimes I'm beginning to debate and to ask myself, this thing that we call parliaments, with due respect to those who are parliamentarians, can we not re-examine them so that we stop wearing wigs in them, so that they begin to respond to our realities? In other words, we can forget the form and look at the substance. Is it possible that we infuse this into our governance structures? Is it possible? I'm just asking and agonizing. Is it possible to do things in a different way so that we achieve things in a manner that we understand? Because Alexander Pope once said, a little modernity is a dangerous thing. Drink deep the western spring or taste not. Is it possible that these governance structures that we have do not respond to our needs? We are told that there is something called democracy. Who defines it? Who is this who has the monopoly of wisdom, whom God sent without our knowledge, to tell us that the democracy must have certain ingredients which are defined for us in Europe and America? Can't we define them in Windhoek? Can't we define them in Pretoria? Can't we define them in Maputo so that we have something with an African flavor? Can we not? In other words, time has come that we must make our universities the seats of thought. The minerals that we have, can we not add value? The borders that we have, and I said in the morning and I'll repeat it again, why? When I want to come to Namibia, must I ask, do I need a visa? Why? Why do I need a visa? Why do I need a visa to go to Liberia? Why do I need a visa to go to Ghana? Why can't I wake up in Nairobi in the morning and come to Windhoek here just to see Windhoek? Because an American in Boston, Massachusetts can wake up in the morning, fly 6 hours, and is only grappling with one currency, the dollar. Look at your Africa. I moved from South Africa, I'm dealing with the rand. Oh, I moved to Lesotho, I'm dealing with the Lilangeni. I moved to Zambia, I'm dealing with the Kwacha. I moved to Mozambique, I'm dealing with the medical. I moved to Malawi, the Kwacha. I come here with the dollar. I moved to Angola, I'm dealing with the Kwanza. I moved to the Democratic Republic of Congo, I'm dealing with the franc. I moved to Nigeria, I'm dealing with the Naira. I moved to Ghana, I'm dealing with the cedi. I come back to Zimbabwe, you don't know whether you are dealing with the dollar or the yuan or the pound. Then you delude yourself that you can grow. How can you grow? When you have a population of 1.2 billion people and none of our currencies is called hard currency. Not one. Not one. I have Kenya shillings in my briefcase. Until I am back in Nairobi, it is useless. I'll carry a souvenir of $1 Namibian to beef up and enrich my money collection, but it will be useless. Can we not think of having a currency that has validity initially across the SADC, and one across East African Community, and one across Central Africa, and one across ECOWAS, and another one in the Maghreb, so that in 2050 or 2063, we have one currency called the Afro? Is it not possible? Is it beyond our imagination? Particularly the young people who are here, when we are talking about Agenda 2063, is it not possible? Is it not something that we can imagine? I'm submitting to us that it can be done. I'm submitting to us that we must begin to work at it. You know, sometimes when I think about Africa and I'm told that Namibia is 95% Christian, nominal Christians. People go to church on a Monday as a social duty, on a Sunday and Saturday, but perhaps no conviction. But I sometimes suspect that we get the Bible very wrong. When Christ is saying that today has enough problems, do not think about tomorrow, he's not telling you to stop thinking. He's simply saying, prepare for tomorrow so that for today, tomorrow. In other words, he's saying, if you prepare for today, tomorrow will take care of itself. But this idea that Kenyan religious philosopher called Mbiti says that Africans are notoriously religious. And you see it even in schools. We must all be prayerful. I'm all for prayers as a practicing Christian. But this assumption in every sector of our life, that when you are a student, you don't read at all. And then 1 week to the examination, your entire family is involved in prayer and fasting. You will never pass the examination. This idea that when we have economic problems, then we pray and fast. It will never happen. Even when you look at the Bible, the dream by Joseph is that you store during times of plenty. It is in the Bible before the birth of Christ. So even if you give the African problem a spiritual dimension, we still don't get it right. And I'll continue on that trajectory to take you to the book of Matthew, about this man who goes away and gives one person 5 talents, and another one 2 talents, and another one 1 talent, and he goes back and comes back and he finds the one with 5 talents saying, oh, I've made 5 more, good worker, and another one 2 talents, good worker, and to the one that was given talent I say, I know you. You are in the business of gathering where you did not spread. And he tells him, why did you not take it to the bank? If you allow me, sometimes I suspect that the one with 1 talent was us, the Africans. Because uranium is under our earth. Natural gas is under our earth. Gold is under our earth. And the Bible is still right. and to those who do not have, even the little that they have will be taken and it will be given to those who have. Now you see, your uranium is being given to the Chinese. It's being given to the Malaysians. Your gas is being given to Shell BP. Your oil is being given to Total. Your timber is being given to the Malaysians. And here you are left wondering, waiting for God to come majestically and dramatically to part your Red Sea. You must part your own Red Sea. Because you have the intellectual wherewithal to do it. So, fellow Africans, leadership is at the very heart of it. Africa will rise, and I want to conclude by telling us that there are good things happening in Africa. Already there are good things which we can build on. But there is another thing that stands on the path of Africa: corruption. You know, charged the wife and he was convicted and sent back to Nigeria. When he went back to Nigeria, he became the governor of the Delta State. Africa's affinity for electing thieves into public office is a legend. He then stayed, having stolen in Nigeria. He wanted to buy a private jet, and he made the mistake of going to Dubai. He was arrested in Dubai, he was taken to England, and he was convicted, him, his wife, and his girlfriend. He served his term and was released early in the year, and he wants to contest again in Nigeria. Recently, the former Minister for Petroleum in Nigeria, Ms. Madueke, who is now being indicted in London, in Italy, and possibly in the United States, had 37 flats seized in Nigeria alone. Many of you may have one flat which you are struggling to pay mortgage every month. You receive orders that you are going to have the thing taken. Madueke had 37. You have 14 regions in Namibia. He could distribute to every region one flat, and still she has others. That kind of primitive accumulation is what is killing Africa. We must tell Africans, as Mwalimu Kambarage Nyerere said, that the privilege and honor to serve is not a privilege to steal and to engage in thievery. You know, many leaders in Africa have nice retirement packages. You don't need to steal. You don't need to steal at all. You only need to serve in dignity. Zambia's David Kaunda, when he died, had only $8,000 equivalent dollars in his account after 24 years in office. $8,000 only. That is pocket change for one of your councillors here in Namibia. That is what they use for lunch by our government ministers in several African countries. Primitive accumulation. The writer in the New African says that he looks forward to the day when Africans shall liberate themselves from corruption, so that Africans may say, like the man in the Bible says of death, "Oh corruption, where is thy sting? Where is thy sting?" I look forward to those days. Unfortunately, a number of African countries are beginning to move in that direction. You go to Botswana. Ian Khama is doing a good job. Ministers are getting jailed. There is something that we are fond of in Africa called civic education. People know that corruption is wrong. So you educate them, and after you have educated them, they wonder what is wrong with you. The best civic education is to arrest one or two cabinet ministers, take all their property and send them to jail. Then that is enough civic education to tell you. Because the people will know that there are no sacred cows. In Rwanda, Kagame is sending them to jail. In Tanzania, John Pombe Magufuli is sending them to jail. We need a few cabinet ministers in jail. We need a few members of parliament in jail, not because we are scientists, but because to whom much is given, much is accepted. We are telling people, lead by example. And we are telling you, as I conclude, the young men who are here, and the young women who are here, Mwalimu Kambarage Nyerere said that when you are looking for leaders, look for the following qualities, or the following things in those who want to be leaders. Do they love power for its own sake? If they do, reject them. Do they love popularity for its own sake? If they do, reject them. Do they love property for its own sake? If they for its own sake, if they do, reject them. Do they love pomposity for its own sake? If they do, reject them. In my view, African leaders must now be liberated from the feeling that they must have all these trappings of power. First lady, I'm very happy with you. In many African countries, being the first lady, there would have been men and women who think we are murderers in this assembly because they are protecting you. Why should you be protected from your people? You have come in simplicity. I encourage you to continue. If you can graciously tell His Excellency, let him leave in simplicity. And I'm told that he does. So that when I'm speaking about great leaders, I'll talk about the Jihadi and say, behold, a simple man. Behold. Our continent is, in my view, can be used very effectively to create new cadres of leadership. I've seen that happen in countries such as South Africa. I've seen that happen in countries such as Angola through MPLA, or Mozambique through Frelimo. And it is possible, therefore, that under SWAPO, it can happen. And I was saying in the morning that one of the things that your country is already doing, which I think is a good thing, is that leadership is becoming a relay race. President Myoma served for his 15 years. President Pohamba served his 10 years. President Hage, I'm quite certain he's going to serve his 10 years. And the beauty of that is that, number one, it demystifies leadership. And it creates a pool of great men who have served their country, who are a reservoir for guidance. So that young man who is in the African Union has no shortage of people that can mentor him. And I have no doubt that he can be mentored in the party, he can be mentored by those leaders. And it should not stop there. It should not stop there, even in the universities. I have no doubt that perhaps SWAPO has a branch at the university, as it should, as CCM in Tanzania has. Therefore, you are in a very good place. You are in a very good place as Namibia. And I'm submitting to you that it will happen. But remember, you must lead, you must meet the leaders halfway. It is only, as Amilcar Cabral used to say, when you shine like a pink poodle, you will be identified. So shine like a pink puddle and the president will see. I'm certain that the president may have seen you where you are. You never know what happens. You have talked about Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Kenya's Ngugi wa Thiong'o. One of the great books that Ngugi has written is Decolonizing the Mind. Part of the African problem is low self-esteem. A friend of mine used to tell me that in many African countries, whether wittingly or unwittingly, when they see a white man at the head of an organization or a white woman, say the things are not good. When you see a white pilot entering the Namibian airline, you say things are now good. It is a function of low self-esteem. And I'm submitting to us here that until the day that we of the Negroid race begin to think that we are not children of a lesser God, we are not going to realize our potential. What I'm saying is unpalatable, but it is the truth. In my own country, in Kenya now, my fellow Negroids run down the Kenya Airways. We have not now brought a white man to create order. And somehow, order will come somehow. Our Kenya Airports Authority is now headed by a white man. And somehow order will come. I'm submitting to us, you fellow Negroids who are in this room. This is why Martin Luther King Jr. used to say, the mind is the standard of the man. Why are our young men and women running to go to Europe and America? It is because the Europeans and the Americans have created order. Why are you not running to Nigeria? Why are you not running to Congo? That is my answer to that question. Trade. You know, the Chinese are to be admired. In my own lifetime, I've seen China rise from a backward country with no technology to conquer the world. In the area of mobile telephony, in the next few years, each one of you will have Huawei or Techno. China. Most of us who are here, in your houses, there must be an electronic item that is made in China. Why? Because the Chinese leadership are clear about what they want and they are working towards it. What am I saying? That Africans don't realize their potential because Africans in their collectivity have not identified, and if they have identified, they don't work towards what they want as it should be. Look at free movement of goods. Within the SADC and the SADC protocols, there ought to be free movement. And a country such as Namibia, with a population of no more than 3 million, if no more than 3 million at the very best, how can you realize your potential within intra-African trade? It is through SADC. Namibia can identify her niche. And within SADC, immediately you have 60 million South Africans, immediately you have the Angolan population, you have a market of 100 million. And how do you achieve that? To remove tariff and non-tariff barriers. How do you achieve that? To ensure that there is free movement of labor. How do you achieve that? To ensure that we produce items that can be sold here. You are selling beef to Europe. And the Europeans will ensure that before you sell your beef, they want to know when that cow was born. We now have birthdays for cows. They want to know the anniversaries when the cow was inoculated. In other words, from the cradle to the plate, they want to know the history of your cow. That cow could very well be sold to Malawi. I'm not saying you compromise standards, but I'm simply saying that you have a market here which is unexplored. I'm saying that there are many things that can be done. And if we can achieve intra-African trade even up to a level of 40%, then we would begin to have what one would call hard African currencies. Look at a country within your region such as Swaziland. And I said this before. In my own view, those who are in government should ask themselves, when they are negotiating with a country like China with a population of 1.2 billion, do you think that Swaziland can meaningfully enter into a bilateral relationship with China? It's a joke. It's a joke, with due respect. Why do I say it's a joke? Because you have a population of 1 million, the purchasing population is possibly not more than 1/3, you don't mean anything to China. But if you negotiate the bilateral within the context of SADC, then it begins to make sense. If you begin to negotiate the bilateral, if you are Benin in West Africa and you are negotiating with the European Union, negotiate the bilateral within ECOWAS, then you are protected by ECOWAS. But what happens is that the Chinese are very clever people. They'll always have two agreements. One is the Chinese version, which is the authentic version, and which sometimes has details that you don't have in the English version. So that when it comes to interpretation, they go back to the Chinese version. And you lose 10 out of 10 times. I know the Chinese were building in Kenya one of the roads, and they have this thing, and you know the Chinese are clever. They come with the money, so you can't refuse. They come with the money, they say, they design, they say, oh, no, we design as we build. And when you are designing as you build it, you start with 20 billion, by the time you are finished it's 40 billion. In other words, we must recognize that which is in our best interest. Several years ago, in 1998, as a young student of the WTO rules, I was invited to a meeting in Grand Bassam in Cote d'Ivoire by the office of the Prime Minister of Cote d'Ivoire. And what amazed me is that that meeting was a meeting of French-speaking West African countries guided by France on what position the France and the French-speaking countries were going to take at the high-level conference in Seattle in the United States of America. How? It means, therefore, and when you go there, you find the Japanese have a delegation of 200 people, with 10 of them in agricultural subsidy on tomatoes and onions and rice, and Africa has a delegation of 5. 3 of whom have no idea what WTO is. The very first thing they ask when they arrive in China is why is the biggest mall? How can you negotiate? The Chinese and the Japanese are prepared to meet with you up to midnight for 24 hours because they have teams that are negotiating. And what they do is that they bring you things to sign at midnight. And meanwhile, you're getting a lot of sake, you are drunk. So I'm submitting to us, and this is a question of leadership. Leadership is about recognizing. And I've never, you know, one of the things that I've never understood about most African leadership, get the best men and women, the credit will go to you. You consult me. Who knows me? You consult me in my room, you pay me some $3,000, $5,000, I'll be very happy, I'll pay school fees. Nobody knows me. It is you who is known, it is you whose wisdom will be praised. So the first thing that African leaders must do is to respect talent. Use talent, squeeze the juice out of talent, and if you remember that Europe and America do on a daily basis. In my younger days, in 1990s, I had the privilege as an intern working for Julius Nyerere when he was no longer the president. And what amazed me about it, as a young man, he asked me, what should I do? And he's asking you not because you know better, but he's simply bouncing off his own thoughts anew on the mind of a young, enthusiastic, and self-conceited young man. But even from that, he gets something. And I'm submitting to us that that is very important. The second thing that I want to say, leadership is also helped by the quality of the people who follow. Part of the African problem is some of us, we who are led, we are like donkeys. You can't pull us, you pull us in the right direction, we want short-term solutions. You know, Namibia gained independence only a few decades ago. If you are looking for instant coffee solutions, it will not happen. There are certain things that it is only your children and children's children who will enjoy. And I've always said that our contribution and duty is we should have a generation that plants the seed, a generation that waters the seed, a generation that prunes the tree, a generation that enjoys the shade. That is how it is done. That is how it has been done throughout history. So intra-African trade is great, and I believe that is beginning to happen. You can see that in ECOWAS. SADC had a meeting recently in East African Community. We think that we may have a single currency in the year 2017, and I think that would be a very good thing. If we had a single currency in the 5 countries in East Africa, it would be a good thing. I know that you here have a Vision 2030, and I believe that Vision 2030, the problem with Namibia is that the world now believes you are rich. Because you have a GDP of 11,000 United States dollars, and some African countries have a GDP of $600. So you are considered to be a middle-level economy. So you suffer very harshly. If I were you, I would present myself as very poor, so that you gain some of these things that other countries are gaining. But it's a good thing. The only thing that I think Namibia should do, like I think this is true of Namibia and Botswana and Equatorial Guinea. What is your Gini index? The gap between the rich and the poor. Because that is where the danger is. You know, the danger is this, and I see it in the middle class estates, that you have a large population that is poor, and you have this middle class that is very rich and doing very well, so you begin building walls around your houses, complete with watchmen and panic button. But I've always said that when the people come, you will be so panicked that you'll never remember where the panic button is, and they'll come anyway. So what is the solution? The solution is, let us reduce the gap between the rich and the poor. Let us have things. The reason why countries like Denmark, a friend of mine has just taken their children to Denmark, free education. Germany, free education. Once you have free education, what do you need much money for? Once you have free medical health, what do you need much money for? Once you have a good pension scheme, what do you need much money for? Once you can afford a holiday once in a year, what do you need much money for? Once you have subsidized car loans, what do you need money for? If you can get a house on reasonable mortgage, what do you need much money for? Because people don't want to be this filthy rich, primitive accumulation. And if the governments can do that, you'll discover that governance becomes very easy. And we have a duty in our institutions of higher learning to also create a generation of Africans and Namibians who are not looking for employment, they are creating employment. And it can be done. Let us create employment. What are you doing? And I'm running myself, we are launching an African program where I'm telling young Africans, go home and create employment for 5 others. Go home, so that when the government is talking, you are also contributing to the government. The last question is about corruption. I always tell this story. In Africa, if you see a head of corruption who is appointed for 5 years and he serves for 5 years, he is not fighting corruption at all. Experience has shown that when you are the head of an anti-corruption and you are in a government that is not interested in fighting corruption, if you serve for 1 year, say hallelujah. Why do I say so? In South Africa, McCarthy tried to fight corruption. He was removed. He went to the World Bank. In Nigeria, Nuhu Ribadu wanted to fight corruption. He was exiled. In Malawi, the same thing. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, the same thing. And I always remember this personal story. One day, I'm sitting in my office, and we have conducted investigations. President Kibaki was the president. And on my desk are 6 files of 6 cabinet ministers that we want to take to court. And on the other side, 48 heads of parastatals. And my officers tell me, you know, when you do this to a government, it can be destabilizing. So wisdom demands that you inform the president. And I book an appointment to see the head of state. And to his credit, he gives me, we had the government of national unity at that time. And I go to the president, and the chief of staff is there, and I told him, Your Excellency, I would prefer to speak to you alone. And to his credit, he moved away. And I told His Excellency, this is who I have. We intend to go to court, but there are 2 impediments. Remember that I must send these files to the Attorney General who sits in your cabinet, and it is your own cabinet that must approve, and there are 6 cabinet fellows. I'm now, in a manner of speaking, Your Excellency, telling the hyenas to hang themselves. And with the help of hindsight, I ought to have used a kinder language. But the exuberance and the enthusiasm of a crusader sometimes takes away the wisdom. So the president tells me, and our president had a lot of sense of humor, he tells me, go and do your work. I asked myself, I expected enthusiastic support. I did not get it. I then am advised by the person who was the chief government spokesman, tells me, you know, this is a government, a coalition government. Go to the prime minister across the road. And I walk to the prime minister who comes from my ethnic group, and I begin to speak in English, and he turns me back into my mother tongue. And this is what he asks me: how many people from my side of the coalition? At that time, we had a new constitution, and one of the things, I'm giving you this story to answer your question. We are now making the new law. And in the new law, we ask for a new structure, and those who are there, cabinet ministers, a subcommittee of the cabinet that is looking at the new law. And before the meeting starts, I raised my hand to the chair and said, I have an objection. He says, what objection? I said, 90% of you here are under investigation, and therefore you have no moral authority to talk about this law. I was then asked to excuse myself. The following day, the law was amended at midnight to abolish my office and that of my 4 directors. So that tells you that when you fight corruption, and since then, of course, I've enthusiastically talked about and against corruption. But there are African countries where anti-corruption authorities are working. I'm not very familiar with the workings of the anti-corruption authority here in Namibia, but I know as a fact that in Tanzania they are working. I know as a fact that in Botswana is working. I know as a fact that in Mauritius it is working. I know as a fact that in Nigeria it is beginning to work. I know as a fact that in Rwanda it is working. In other words, I'm saying, the magic bullet is political will. And in this regard, let me tell you, wherever in the world, the institution of the president, that is where the tone is set. Once it is known, as Nyerere said, that the State House is a holy place, and there is a high priest there who brooks no nonsense, everybody will fall into line. Everybody. Saying this out of experience because corruption is pernicious. Corruption is dangerous.
If you see people dying in hospitals, those who have engaged in corruption are the murderers. If you see children not going to school, those who are engaged as ministers of education are the ones who are responsible. Corruption is what continues to undermine Africa, and we should not joke with it. We should not joke with it. Those are my answers. And let me tell you one thing. I've always said that if you want to fight corruption in Africa, you must be prepared to die. You must be prepared. If you are not suicidal, don't choose to be an anti-corruption. That is my